YouTube and fellow Star Wars collectors. On this episode of Toys Are the Way, we'll be taking a look at the latest addition to the Vintage Collection's creature lineup, the Bantha and Tusken Raider from Star Wars A New Hope. Welcome back everyone and channel members. So as I've mentioned before, it has been non-stop deliveries for the fall of 2025 when it comes to the Vintage Collection. We have just recently gotten our HasLab Cantinas delivered. There's been a number of different figures showing up. The Land Speeder, we just funded our 5th Vintage Collection HasLab for the Republic gunship, and now we have the Bantha, which is definitely one of my favorite creatures from the Star Wars universe, and definitely one that I love having in my collection already. I have the old Power of the Force 2 version, which is my absolute favorite, but this is looking like a really nice update to the Vintage Collection's creature lineup, so really excited to get this in there. I'm a big fan of Tusken Raiders as well, so definitely something that I wanted to get a couple of, and here you can see I already have 3 of these from Hasbro Pulse, and you know, I'm an army builder, but this is herd building in my opinion, so definitely had to get a couple of these. I couldn't just get one. But with all that being said and done, don't forget to smash a like on this video, subscribe if you're new, or even become a channel member, and let's take a closer look at the packaging, creature, and figure. Taking a look at our vintage style packaging, we have the Star Wars logo and racetrack nicely framing a wonderful toy photography image, doing what it does best, showcasing the Bantha surrounded by a bunch of 3.75 action figures. We have the Kenner logo in the bottom left corner looking absolutely wonderful and nostalgic, along with the Hildebrandt at the top as well. Then we have an image at the bottom right corner which shows you everything that's included in this set. A Tusken Raider with a number of accessories and the Bantha. And then lastly, we do have that call out on the top left corner which lets you know that there is a carded figure inside. Taking a look at the top of the box, we have the Star Wars Hildebrandt and Kenner logo nicely displayed, followed by the title of the creature, Bantha. And then we have some nice toy photography images showcasing the Bantha and Tusken Raider in a diorama setting. On the bottom of the box, we have the Star Wars and Hildebrandt logo once again, followed by a bunch of fine print that nobody really cares about, and another wonderful image of the Bantha in a diorama setting, which actually looks quite wonderful in my opinion. Moving on to the sides of the box, we have a very similar graphic layout going on. We have the Star Wars Hildebrandt Kenner logo once again, followed by the title of the creature, and then several thumbnails showing off the Bantha in all its glory in a bunch of diorama settings. And I must say that the team has done a really nice job with all the different photography images that are showcased on this box. And lastly, on the back of the box, we have the same exact layout from the front, except with some small fine print this time, and the Vintage Collection, Disney, and Hasbro logos in the bottom right corner. So all in all, this is some wonderful looking packaging, and I am definitely looking forward to keeping one of these safely tucked away in my collection. Taking a look at the interior of the box, you have a cardboard tray which is able to slide out, and then you have your carded figure nice and safely stored away on top of this packaging. And you have no issues there, nice carded sample. And then if you take a look inside, you have the Bantha, which is protected this time with a kind of plastic shield and then is encased in a plastic bag. So it'll come nice and pristine to your collection room. Taking a look at our vintage packaging for the included figure, we have the Star Wars logo and racetrack nicely displayed up top, followed by Tusken Raider on a yellow name pill color. We have a nice image of the Tusken Raider and Bantha looking absolutely wonderful with the Kenner logo down below and the Hildebrandt one in the top right corner. Then we have this nice figure looking pretty decent on a bubble. On the back, he is VC 380 in the line, Tusken Raider, Bantha Rider, and we have a small description of the character followed by the Vintage Collection logo and additional images of the card and figure. So this is actually a really nice card back. I absolutely love how the Bantha is just framed in this image right here, and this is definitely going to make a nice addition to the carded collection. Taking a look at the Tusken Raider out of the packaging, this is a figure that many of us are probably pretty familiar with by now in the Vintage Collection. So essentially this is a pretty old figure on the top body which has been kit bashed a number of times over the last couple years to give us what we have going on here. The last update that we really saw that was significant was adding new lower legs to the bottom of this figure to actually make it have, you know, proper articulation on a modern definitive level. These are essentially legs from the Obi-Wan Kenobi figure from that actual series, and then they gave it feet that would match this kind of wrapping material. These legs are great and, you know, did the job, but I will say they're definitely a little funny because of the proportions. You can see here that this leg is kind of short and stumpy on the very bottom part of it. The knee is kind of way too low, and it just looks a little odd sometimes when you get it into some articulated poses like this, but it will actually let you do that. My main problem with this particular release is that on the skirt, they decided to give it a slit down both sides. So you kind of really see that odd proportion, whereas before it was a full skirt and everything was kind of hidden back there. But regardless, definitely a good figure. So like I said, it's got articulated legs, it's got the proper ball jointed hips, it's got a swivel at the thigh, pretty good bend at the knee, and then it has rocker ankles. So these Tuskens can actually do some proper, posing on your shelf display. Moving on to the upper body, we have pretty much a crude swivel here at the waist, no real articulation other than swiveling back and forth. The arms are older style, like in general, just like a very hard, crude hinge, allows you to kind of move pretty well. It's got good range of motion, but yeah, moving on to the arms, you got another bend at the elbow there, which is pretty decent. And then my biggest complaint still to date with this figure is the hands. All you have is a swivel wrist, which isn't great in my opinion. And then you have this one that's slightly sculpted in a way that it's like kind of hinged forward. And I just don't really like that too much. It's a little troubling when it comes to posing with the rifle, but I'll show you a solution that did come up with that in the last couple years. But moving on to the rest of the body, you do have some articulation at the head. It's pretty decent. It's on a ball there, and it's got pretty great range of motion. But taking a look at the rest of the figure, some nice paint apps, lots of silver hits all over all those buttons and stuff like that on his belt. And yeah, overall, a pretty decent looking figure. I will say with this release though, compared to the previous one, you're not getting the full robe, and here you can see that full skirt. This is one before they even updated the hips, so these are just terrible swivels that don't really do great when it comes to posing in general, but I do find it a little odd that this time they didn't give him his robe or, just that accessory in general. But overall, it's nice to see, an evolution of this figure and some variants in our collection. And here you can see my custom figure, which actually has different hand accessories that allow him to interact with the cycler rifle much better. So these are actually hands that you can order online from Marauders Gun Runners if you're not familiar with them. They sell lots of individual parts and ammo pouches and stuff like that for, custom figures or whatever. I'll leave a link in the description down below. This is definitely something that I've shared in the past with some of my custom videos. But as you can see, this one is actually able to interact with the rifle quite well. Now this is a Tusken from the Book of Boba Fett 4-pack Army Builder set that we got a couple years back, and I will also point out that I like this rifle so much more than the one that came with this Bantha Tusken. It's just like looks overall a lot better, and just I don't know, it actually has a strap on it so you can put that on their back. And yeah, you can also see this one has some variations in terms of like what we saw in the Book of Boba Fett with different colors on their like robes and stuff like that. But yeah, mostly just wanted to show you what I've done with the different hands here that actually have hinges and allow you to hold this rifle quite well. In terms of accessories, you're getting the older style rifle that comes with those A New Hope Tuskens. And the one thing I wanted to point out is it's made of a bendy plastic, unfortunately, which is really not great. And like I said before, the other one's a better sculpt. It has that strap, which is nice, but at least this one has some pretty decent paint applications on it. So overall, it's a decent accessory, but really not my favorite. And then taking a look at the gaffy stick as well, same thing. You got some bendy plastic going on here. Really not great. The level of detail I think on this gaffy stick is not as good either, and it's just an older style one that could be better in my opinion. So here you can see a nice evolution of the Tusken Raider over the years. We have the 3.75 Black Series release from a number of years ago, which was actually first released in the VOTC line, and then later we saw an actual update which got rid of those terrible swivel elbows, which nobody likes, and we actually got a hinge at the elbow on this release here from the A New Hope version. And then later we got the Book of Boba Fett version from that 4-pack, which, as I mentioned before, got the leg updates. We got a bunch of different variants with different like cloaks and stuff like that. And now we're getting this Tusken Raider that rides the Bantha. So a nice little evolution here. Definitely nice to see the upgrades that have been made to this figure, but I still think it needs a little bit of refining to make it truly definitive and a nice addition to the collection. Once again, Hasbro delivers another release of the Tusken Raider in the Vintage Collection, but this time takes it a step further with the Bantha Rider variant, which is the first A New Hope style release that utilizes the updated lower legs from the Obi-Wan Kenobi Wandering Jedi figure. The new style barbell hips, swivels at the thigh, hinges at the knees, and rocker ankles will allow the Vintage Collection Tusken Raider to achieve a number of fierce action poses. Whether you're into action figure photography or simply creating dynamic scenes on your shelf displays, this figure has certainly got you covered. While the leg articulation is much better on this figure when compared to releases from long ago, there is still a lack of hinges on the wrist, which does limit how well the Tusken can interact with some of the accessories, namely the cycler rifle, which cannot be displayed in a proper or convincing sniper position due to the included hands, which are less than modern to say the least. I would personally like to see that point of articulation added to these Desert Warriors one day, and the modern gaffy stick and rifles from the Book of Boba Fett release, which are simply much better accessories. Moving on to the main star of the show, we have the Bantha. Now this is an all new from the ground up Bantha, which is always great to see. It has some articulation and some better details overall. But I will say it's very, very similar to the Power of the Force 2 version, which we'll show off in just a moment. And that was definitely my favorite Bantha for a number of years. Now I know that Bantha is actually really expensive on the secondary market and actually pretty hard to find. So this was a smart one for Hasbro to get out there. We needed it on the vintage style packaging, and seeing some updates like the articulation here on the mouth is actually wonderful to see. It allows for some better photography and stuff like that. And I mean, just take a look at those teeth. Who doesn't want this in their collection? So that is actually great to see that improvement there. You also have some really nice detail here in terms of the eyes and stuff like that, which was just not present on that previous Bantha. So I really like what's going on here. Really great detail. The fur is very similar to the old one, and that was my favorite version. So really good stuff here. Get out your comb because this guy is going to need, some brushing and stuff like that. But moving on to the articulation, it's very simple here. So you do pretty much just have some swivels, which allow it to go forward and back. And then you have actually a rocker ankle, which is pretty impressive. So it can kind of get like an angle on it and stuff like that and hinge forward and back. So not too bad. I've been messing around with this articulation, and pretty much, all you can do is kind of like get one foot up or like going back. But that will be kind of helpful for some of the toy photography shots that I do as these guys like march on and stuff like that. But like I said, very, very similar to the old Power of the Force 2 version, but it's also smart for them to get this out there. People always want a Bantha for their collections, and those ones were just really hard to come by. Taking a look at the saddle and stuff like that, it's just molded of a semi-soft but mostly hard plastic piece here. It's got a bunch of different colors on it that make it, look kind of nice and unique. You got some pretty nice detailing here in terms of everything that's going on in the direct saddle area. You got some like pouches and blankets or all sorts of stuff that the Tuskens need as they, travel the Dune Sea. And yeah, overall, pretty decent stuff going on here. You got a little bit of paint applications here on this horn that really bring out some of that detail, which is great. Same thing going on with like the lips, some really interesting texture and just like nice paint applications to really give this thing some life. Again, down at the bottom, you got a little bit of paint applications on his toenails there. Looks like he's just been to the salon. And then he's got this like different type of furry material here on his ankles that just makes him look so ridiculous in my opinion. But yeah, the saddle, I'm pretty sure, yep, there's no belt keeping it on. It kind of, I guess, just slides on and off. Oh, there is a belt. So yeah, you can see there's a belt right here that you can undo and take this off and make him a wild Bantha if you really choose to do so. But yeah, overall, I think this is a really neat update to the vintage collection, and one that was definitely very necessary for many people's collections. Here you have the old Power of the Force 2 versions compared to the new Bantha in the middle, and like I mentioned before, they are very, very similar, and it's mostly because of the fur that's used on these two releases. The old 90s version looks pretty good in my opinion, but I will say that the new one is actually a bit of a better upgrade. The main things that I really like that they've done here is, of course, the articulation, but it's actually a little bit bigger. It's got a beefier stature to it, it's a little taller, and I think that looks a bit more accurate in my opinion. I also like how the horns are actually, a bit larger. They look a little bit more commanding. And yeah, overall, I think that's going to stand out a lot more in my shelf display. Now, what I also like is that they're very similar, so I don't necessarily need to get rid of these old Banthas. I think they'll all kind of blend together and look really nice on my shelf display. So that's also a positive if you already have this Bantha in your collection. Something else I wanted to point out is you can see that the horns on the old one definitely have a little bit more of a wash, which is kind of nice. And something else I didn't point out about the new Bantha is that it has a tail that's, slightly different than the old one. The old one had that hard rubber piece at the end that kind of looks like a beaver tail, and the new one doesn't really have that. And I was hoping that the new one would have maybe like a wire in there so it's slightly articulated, but unfortunately it's not. So that's maybe my one critique of the new Bantha, something they could have improved on. Similar to Hammond Collection and some of those dinosaurs, how that has that wire in there so you're able to move the tail side to side or up and down. I think that actually would have been a nice thing to include with this release. But regardless, like I said, all of these look great, and I'm really excited to add these to the collection. And I'm sure if you're new to collecting in general and just don't have a Bantha, this is a great opportunity for you to finally add this one to your shelf display. The Bantha is a very recognizable animal from the Star Wars universe, and in my opinion, it's definitely a must-have for any collector of, Star Wars action figures. But with all that being said and done, I think it's time to take this Bantha, get him in a diorama setting, and take some action figure photography. I hope you've enjoyed this video and taking a look at this latest addition to our vintage collection shelf displays, the Bantha and Tusken Raider from Star Wars A New Hope. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And don't forget to drop a like on this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really helps and is always greatly appreciated. Thanks everyone, and may the Force be with you.